I'm a leaner, 33 female. I live in a world of words. As a freelance grant writer, my days are spent crafting careful, persuasive arguments for causes I believe in, community gardens, arts programs for at-risk youth, animal shelters. My home office, a small sunlit room overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street, is my sanctuary. It's where I live with my husband, James, a civil engineer whose life is governed by the reassuring certainties of physics and concrete. Our life together is a comfortable balance of my idealism and his pragmatism. But I have another life, another collection of words that James's family knows nothing about. It's a personal blog, a space where I untangle my thoughts on the political and social issues that keep me up at night. It's anonymous, a quiet corner of the internet where I can be unapologetically myself without navigating the delicate minefield of my in-laws' deeply conservative worldview. This story is about the day that corner of the internet was dragged into the harsh light of a family dinner, and how the person who did it vastly underestimated the research skills of a professional grant writer. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The annual Miller Family Summit, as I privately called it, was held at my father-in-law Robert's house. The house itself was a physical embodiment of his values, large, traditional, and impeccably maintained, with not a single blade of grass out of place on the sprawling lawn. It was a house built to project an image of unshakable stability and success, and stepping into it always felt like entering a different era. The air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and the faint, sweet smell of Robert's pipe tobacco, a smell that clung to the heavy brocade curtains and the dark wood of the furniture. James and I were always the first to arrive after his sister, Chloe, who lived only a few towns over. She was already there when we walked in, perched on the arm of a leather armchair, laughing at something Robert had said. Chloe was a real estate agent, and she carried herself with the slick, practiced poise of someone who is always closing a deal. She was beautiful in a way that felt both genetic and meticulously constructed, with perfect blonde hair, a flawless tan, and an outfit that was undoubtedly expensive but curated to look effortlessly chic. She was her father's daughter, a smooth mirror of his opinions, and the undisputed princess of the Miller clan. "Ellie, James, you made it," she chirped, standing to give us both air kisses that didn't quite land on our cheeks. Daddy was just telling the most hilarious story about his golf game. Robert grunted in affirmation from his throne-like recliner, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "Lost $100 to Bill Henderson," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "The man cheats, I swear it." The evening unfolded in this predictable rhythm. Small talk about weather, sports, and the local real estate market, Chloe's domain. She held court, recounting the tale of a recent multi-million-dollar sale with dramatic flair, making sure to highlight her own shrewd negotiating tactics. James, ever the dutiful son, listened attentively, asking the right questions at the right times. I, as usual, felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign tribe. I smiled, I nodded, I sipped my wine, and I tried to make myself as small and agreeable as possible. My relationship with my in-laws wasn't hostile. It was more of a sustained, low-grade bewilderment on their part. I was the freelance writer from the city who married their solid, dependable engineer son. I didn't have a 401(k) from a big corporation. I didn't understand the appeal of joining a country club, and I had once made the grave error of mentioning I composted my kitchen scraps, which was met with blank stares and a swift change of subject. To keep the peace, I had learned to compartmentalize. The Ellie who wrote passionate essays about systemic inequality and climate change was tucked away. In her place was this quieter, blander version, an expert in neutral topics like gardening and popular television shows. But that night, Chloe seemed different. There was a predatory gleam in her eye I hadn't seen before. During a lull in the conversation, she turned her full attention to me. "So, Ellie," she began, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. James tells me you've been really busy with your projects lately. It must be nice to have so much free time during the day. What is it you actually do with yourself while everyone else is at a real job? The jab was clear, wrapped in a veneer of innocent curiosity. James shifted uncomfortably beside me. Chloe, we've been over this. Ellie's a grant writer. She works very hard. Oh, I know, she said, waving a dismissive hand. I just mean, besides that, you must have hobbies. You're always on your laptop. I just wonder what fascinating things you're typing up. I felt a prickle of unease. It was true, I was always on my laptop, but how she said it felt like an accusation. Just work, mostly, I said, forcing a tight smile. Grant proposals are pretty research-intensive, lots of typing. Right, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. She was fishing for something. It's just, my friend said she saw this blog, a political thing, and the writing style sounded so much like you. Really passionate. My blood ran cold. My blog was anonymous. I used a pseudonym and a generic template. How could anyone possibly connect it to me? Was she bluffing? I searched her face for a clue, but it was a mask of pleasant inquiry. I decided to play dumb. That's funny, I said with a light laugh. I can't imagine who that would be. I don't really have time for blogging. The grant writing keeps me pretty chained to my desk. Chloe let it drop, turning the conversation back to a less threatening topic, but the damage was done. A seed of anxiety had been planted. She knew something, or she suspected it. The rest of the pre-dinner chit-chat was a blur. I felt exposed, the carefully constructed walls between my two worlds suddenly feeling perilously thin. As we were called to the dining room, James gave my hand a squeeze, a silent acknowledgement of the tension. But as we sat down at the long, polished mahogany table, under the judgmental gaze of a dozen framed photos of Miller ancestors, I had the distinct feeling that I was the guest of honor at my own execution. The setup was complete. The dining table at the Miller house was Robert's stage. It was where he held court, delivering monologues on the state of the world that were meant to be received as gospel. The main course was a perfectly roasted chicken, and as Robert carved it with surgical precision, he began his usual sermon. Tonight's topic was the moral decay of the younger generation. No respect for hard work, he declared, placing a slice of white meat onto Chloe's plate. Everyone wants a handout. They're brainwashed by these radical professors and the media, thinking the world owes them a living. They protest everything, they're angry about everything, but they've never done a real day's work in their lives. He glanced in my direction, a subtle but unmistakable challenge. I kept my eyes fixed on my empty plate, my hands clenched in my lap under the table. James shot a warning look at his father, but Robert was on a roll. It's this entitlement mentality, he continued, gesturing with the carving knife. This idea that their feelings are more important than facts, that their opinions, which they shout all over the internet, are a valid substitute for experience and wisdom. The table was silent, save for the scraping of cutlery. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me, the designated representative of this supposedly degenerate generation. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a familiar mix of anger and helplessness. I just had to get through this. Smile, nod, and stay silent. That's when Chloe decided to light the match. You know, Daddy, it's funny you mention that, she said, her voice laced with a malicious sort of innocence. She dabbed her lips with her napkin, a picture of composure. Speaking of people shouting their opinions on the internet, Ellie, you should tell them about your blog. The world seemed to slow down. Every head at the table turned towards me. James froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. I looked at Chloe, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Her smile was tight, triumphant. This was no accident. This was a planned, deliberate ambush. My blog, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Oh, don't be so modest, Chloe trilled, her eyes wide with fake encouragement. The one I stumbled upon the other day, the principled perspective. It's you, isn't it? I recognized your writing style immediately. So fiery. She had not stumbled upon it. She had hunted for it. The friendly questions from earlier were reconnaissance. She had found my one vulnerability and was now dissecting it in front of the most hostile audience imaginable. Robert's face darkened. What is she talking about, Alina? Before I could answer, Chloe continued, pulling out her phone. Let me see if I can find it again. There was one post that was particularly memorable. Ah, here it is. She cleared her throat dramatically. Deconstructing privilege, why generational wealth is a moral failing. She read my title with a sneer, then continued with a quote I had written in a moment of private, righteous anger. We cannot pretend that success is born in a vacuum. The myth of the self-made man is a comforting lie told to justify a system that funnels resources to the few at the expense of the many. She looked up, her eyes gleaming. There's more, she said, Relishi. NG the moment. She talks about the necessity of aggressive wealth redistribution and calls corporate tax cuts theft from the public good. A wave of nausea washed over me. Hearing my words, my deeply held beliefs, twisted into weapons and read aloud in that room was a unique form of violation. They were no longer my thoughts, they were evidence for the prosecution. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Robert slowly placed his knife and fork on his plate, the clink of metal on porcelain echoing in the cavernous dining room. He stared at me, his face a mask of cold fury. He wasn't just looking at his son's wife. He was looking at the enemy he pontificated about, the living embodiment of the ideology he despised, sitting at his own table, eating his food. Is this true, Alina? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I couldn't find my voice. I looked to James, my silent plea for help hanging in the air. He looked utterly poleaxed, his face pale with shock, his eyes darting between me, his sister, and his father. He was trapped, a deer in the headlights of his own family's implosion. I started, but my throat was too tight. Chloe wasn't finished. She delivered the killing blow with a sigh of feigned concern. I just thought it was something the family should know, for transparency's sake. It seems like a pretty big secret to be keeping from your husband and from all of us. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just that she had outed me, it was the calculated cruelty of it. She had waited for the perfect moment in front of the entire family to cause maximum damage. She hadn't just exposed my blog, she had tried to poison my marriage and sever my connection to the family in one fell swoop. The perfectly roasted chicken sat untouched on my plate. I had completely lost my appetite. The family schism had begun, and I was standing right on the fault line. The drive home was a cocoon of tense silence. The car, usually a space of easy conversation and shared music, felt like a pressurized chamber. James kept his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of orange and white, replaying the scene at the dinner table over and over in my mind. Chloe's triumphant smile, Robert's icy fury, the shocked faces of aunts and uncles. My own mortifying inability to speak. When we finally pulled into our driveway, James cut the engine, and the silence became even heavier. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked, his voice strained. He didn't sound angry, just wounded. Tell you what, that I have a blog. I shot back, the defensiveness rising in me. Or that I have opinions your family would hate. You already knew that, James. We've always known that. I didn't know you were writing it all down for the world to see, he said, finally turning to look at me. Ellie, you heard what she read. You called generational wealth a moral failing. My father built his business from nothing to give us a better life. That's his entire identity. It's our family's identity. I wrote that anonymously for myself, I said, my voice cracking. It wasn't for him, it wasn't for any of them, and your father did not build his business from nothing. His father gave him the seed money. That's the entire point. That's not what he needs to hear from his daughter-in-law. And Chloe, my God, I can't believe she did that. To do it at the table in front of everyone, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He was caught in the middle, and I knew it. He was angry at Chloe for her cruelty, but he was also blindsided by the content of my writing and the sheer magnitude of the ideological chasm she had just revealed. Our argument didn't resolve anything. It just left us in separate corners of our own home that night, the space between us filled with unspoken resentments and the fallout of Chloe's detonation. The days that followed were a slow-motion nightmare. My phone, usually buzzing with messages from friends and clients, was silent. Then the calls started. An aunt called not to talk to me, but to James to express her deep concern. James's mother called in tears, asking how I could be so hateful. The message was clear. I was the problem. I was the agent of chaos who had shattered their peaceful family gatherings. The final blow came from Robert, who called James and, in a voice of cold finality, informed him that I was no longer welcome in his home until I issued a formal, public apology for my disrespectful and radical beliefs. I felt like I was suffocating. I had been tried and convicted without a single person, not even James at first, truly asking for my side of the story. I was isolated, attacked, and painted as a monster, all because my sister-in-law decided to use my private thoughts as a social grenade. James, to his credit, began to see the calculated malice in Chloe's AC. Tian's as the days wore on. His initial shock curdled into a deep, protective anger on my behalf. He told his father in no uncertain terms that if I wasn't welcome, neither was he. The schism was now a gaping canyon, with James and me on one side and the rest of his family on the other. One miserable afternoon, I was doing what so many of us do when we feel lost and powerless, doom scrolling. I was mindlessly flicking through Instagram, a sea of curated happiness that felt a million miles away from my own reality. I followed a number of brands that aligned with my values, small businesses focused on sustainability, ethical production, and social justice. One of them, an online store called Verdant Home, posted a story celebrating Pride Month, featuring their founder, a woman named Maya, talking about the importance of corporate allyship. I'd always admired their brand. They sold beautiful, minimalist home goods made from recycled materials and donated a portion of their profits to environmental and LGBTQ+ charities. They were everything the Miller family was not. Numbly, I tapped on their profile and went to their website. I needed a distraction, something to focus on other than the wreckage of my family life. I clicked on the About Us page, rereading the story of how Maya started the company from her garage with a passion for design and a commitment to making a positive impact. I scrolled down past the mission statement and the photos of her smiling team. And then I saw it. At the very bottom of the page, in a smaller font, was a section titled, Our Founders and Early Investors. It was a list of names, and the second name on that list, right after Maya's, made my breath catch in my throat. Chloe Miller. It couldn't be. I read it again. And a third time. Chloe, my sister-in-law Chloe, the sycophant who parroted her father's conservative talking points, who sat there smugly as he railed against radical causes. She was a founding investor in Verdant Home, one of the most vocally progressive, woke companies I followed. The hypocrisy was so staggering, so profoundly audacious, that for a moment I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. She had set my life on fire for having the very same values her own business was built on, the very same values that were quietly lining her pockets. My numbness evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sharp, and intensely focused clarity. Chloe had forgotten one crucial detail in her rush to destroy me, her own glass house, and she just handed me a fistful of stones. The grant writer in me took over. The part of my brain that could sift through dense financial reports, connect disparate pieces of information, and build an irrefutable case was now humming with a new, singular purpose. My grief and anger were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but they were now channeled into a cold, methodical resolve. This was no longer just a family drama. It was a research project. My first step was to move beyond the company's website. An About Us page could be outdated. I needed concrete legal proof. I went to the state's business registration portal and searched for Verdant Home, LLC. The public filing came up instantly. I downloaded the PDF of their original articles of organization. And there, listed under governing persons, were two names, Maya Singh, managing member, and Chloe Miller, member. It was official. it was legal. She wasn't just an early investor who threw some money at a friend. She was a listed member of the LLC, a partner. My heart gave a little thump of satisfaction. This was real. Next, I started digging into the company's history. I searched for old news articles, press releases, and blog interviews from when Verdant Home first launched about 4 years ago. It took some deep diving, past the recent glossy features in lifestyle magazines, but I eventually found what I was looking for. A feature on a local business blog titled Verdant Home's Dynamic Duo. The article was mostly about Maya, the face of the company, but it mentioned her partnership with her business-savvy best friend, who provided the crucial seed capital and handled the initial financial structuring, but preferred to remain behind the scenes to focus on her primary career in real estate. The article didn't name Chloe, but it was another crucial piece of the puzzle. It established that this wasn't just a passive investment. She was a key player from the very beginning. The hypocrisy was the most galling part. I spent an hour documenting it, creating a spreadsheet like I would for a grant proposal. In one column, I listed Robert and Chloe's stated beliefs from that horrible dinner: moral decay, disdain for handouts, and anger at radical social justice. In the other column, I pasted screenshots from Verdant Home's website and social media. There was their official Pride Month collection, with 15% of proceeds going to the Trevor Project. There was their Black History Month feature, promoting Black-owned businesses. There was a detailed page on their site about their carbon-neutral shipping, their use of sustainable bamboo, and their partnership with a nonprofit that provided job training for formerly incarcerated women, a cause I had literally written a grant for a year ago. Chloe wasn't just a hypocrite. She was monetizing the very ideology her family claimed to despise. She was profiting from the woke agenda that Robert saw as the downfall of Western civilization. The more I uncovered, the more my fury solidified into a diamond-hard point of purpose. But I needed one more thing. I needed to confirm that she was still an active partner, that she hadn't sold her stake years ago. I also needed to understand why she was a silent partner. The public reason was her real estate career, but that felt thin. The real reason, I suspected, was the one I was currently living through: her family. I couldn't just call up Verdant Home and ask. I needed a strategy. I needed a way to talk to Maya Singh directly, not as an accuser, but as a potential ally. My grant-writing career gave me the perfect cover. I spent the next hour crafting the perfect email. Subject: a question from a fellow grant writer and admirer of Verdant Home. Dear Ms. Singh, my name is Eleanor Miller. I hope you don't mind the cold outreach. I am a freelance grant writer, and for years I have admired Verdant Home not just for its beautiful products, but for its deeply integrated corporate philanthropy. Your commitment to sustainability and social justice is a model I often cite in proposals. I'm currently working on a project exploring the power of founder-led missions in maintaining brand integrity over time. Your story is particularly inspiring. I was hoping you might be willing to spare 15 minutes for a brief virtual coffee, so I could ask a few questions about how you've successfully scaled your business without compromising on the core values you started with. I'm especially interested in learning how the original founding team's vision has been protected during your growth. Thank you for your time and for the incredible work you do. Sincerely, Eleanor Miller. It was professional, respectful, and it appealed to her pride in her work. It also contained the hook: how the original founding team's vision has been protected. I wasn't asking about Chloe directly. I was asking about the integrity of the founding vision, a question any passionate founder would be happy to answer. I hit send, my heart thrumming with nervous energy. Now, all I could do was wait. The investigation was complete. The trap was baited. 2 days later, a reply landed in my inbox. It was from Maya Singh herself. She was flattered by my email, she said, and would be happy to chat. She was busy, but she could squeeze in a 20-minute video call on Friday morning. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the calendar invitation. It was happening. When Friday came, I set up my home office just so. The background was professional, with a neat bookshelf and a healthy-looking fiddle-leaf fig. I wore a simple, smart-looking blouse. When Maya's face popped up on my screen, I was struck by how warm and genuine she seemed, even through a pixelated display. She had a bright smile and intelligent eyes. This was the woman Chloe was betraying with her double life. We started with pleasantries. I told her again how much I admired her company, and she spoke with infectious passion about her mission. We quickly found common ground, talking about the challenges and rewards of working in a values-driven field. I could see why her company was successful. Her conviction was authentic. After about 10 minutes of building rapport, I steered the conversation toward my stated purpose. One thing that really fascinates me, I began, choosing my words carefully, is how you navigate the pressures to compromise. I imagine as you grow, you get investment offers or partnership opportunities from people who don't necessarily share your core ethics. Maya's smile tightened just a fraction. That's the constant battle, she admitted with a sigh. You have to be ruthless about who you get into business with. One bad partnership can dilute the brand overnight. This was my opening. It's something I'm dealing with in a personal capacity right now, actually, I said, affecting a look of thoughtful concern. A situation where someone's very public persona is completely at odds with their private financial dealings. It's complicated. It makes you question if you can trust anyone. I left the statement hanging in the air, a vague and relatable problem. It worked. Maya's expression softened with empathy. "Oh, I know exactly what you mean," she said, leaning closer to the camera as if sharing a secret. "It's one of the biggest frustrations of my job. I have a partner, a silent partner, who has been with me from the beginning. Financially, the company wouldn't exist without her." Boo. Ideologically, she trailed off, shaking her head. "Let's just say we are not on the same page." My heart hammered in my chest. "Stay calm, Ellie, don't push too hard." "That must be incredibly difficult to manage," I said sympathetically. "It is," Maya confessed, and now the words started to spill out, a torrent of pent-up frustration. "She insists on being silent, utterly invisible to the public. And honestly, it's for the best. Her social circle, her family, they're the complete opposite of our customer base. They're the people who would mock our Pride campaign, you know. She says her involvement has to stay secret because her father, who is the original source of her investment capital, would completely lose his mind if he knew his money was funding, well, us." I held my breath. It was more perfect than I could have imagined. Chloe hadn't just used her own money, she'd used Robert's money. I decided to take the leap. I looked at Maya with what I hoped was an expression of dawning realization. "This is going to sound crazy," I said softly, "but is your partner's name, by any chance, Chloe Miller?" Maya's eyes went wide. She stared at me, speechless for a moment. How did you know that?" "Because," I said, letting all the pain and exhaustion of the last few weeks flood into my voice, "I'm her sister-in-law. And she just blew up my life and my marriage by exposing my private, progressive blog to her hyper-conservative family. The same family she's terrified will find out about you." Maya just stared. Then she let out a long, slow breath and whispered, "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The rest of the conversation was a blur of shared disbelief and fury. Maya confirmed everything. Chloe was a 40% owner. She received quarterly profit distributions. She had specifically forbidden Maya from ever tagging her on social media or listing her name anywhere prominent. We were two women who had been played by the same person. Each of us used to serve a different side of Chloe's duplicitous life. By the time we hung up, the plan had crystallized in my mind. It wasn't about destroying Verdant Home. I respected Maya and her creation too much for that. It wasn't even about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about truth. It was about forcing all of Chloe's worlds to collide in the one place she felt safest, her father's house. I went to find James. I told him everything: the LLC filing, the interview with Maya, the fact that Chloe was using Robert's own money to fund a company that stood for everything he railed against. James listened, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, and finally to a cold, hard anger I had never seen in him before. "She has to answer for this, Ellie," he said, his voice low and firm. "Not just to us, to him." The plan was simple. James would call his father. He would say that he and I had talked and that I was willing to come over to clear the air and apologize. It was the one thing Robert wanted to hear, the one invitation he wouldn't refuse. Chloe would be there, of course, eager to witness my humiliation. But the apology I was planning to give was not the one they were expecting. The atmosphere in Robert's living room was thick with a tense, triumphant expectation. It was the same room where the setup had begun, but this time, the players were positioned differently. Robert sat in his usual recliner, the patriarch presiding over my impending surrender. Chloe was curled on the sofa, a smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She had won. I was here to beg for forgiveness, to renounce my silly, wrong-headed beliefs and be welcomed back into the fold. She looked like a cat who had not only cornered the canary, but had already swallowed it. James stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid. He was playing his part, the concerned son trying to broker peace. I sat in a stiff-backed armchair opposite Chloe, my hands resting calmly in my lap. Inside, my heart was a frantic drum, but on the surface, I projected an image of quiet contrition. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," I began, my voice soft and measured. I looked directly at Robert. "The other night was unfortunate, and I understand that my private writings caused a great deal of distress." Robert grunted. "Distress is one word for it, disrespect is another, betrayal even." "I understand," I said, nodding slowly. "And I've done a lot of thinking since then. I've come to realize how important it is for one's actions and one's values to be in alignment. You believe in a certain moral and economic worldview, and you live by it. There's an integrity to that which I underestimated." Chloe's smirk widened. This was going even better than she'd imagined. I was practically groveling. "And in that spirit," I continued, turning my gaze to her, "I have to say, Chloe, I am truly in awe of what you've accomplished. It must be so difficult to build something you believe in while also having to keep it a secret from the people you love." The smirk on Chloe's face flickered. A tiny knot of confusion appeared between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "What are you talking about, Ellie?" "I'm talking about your business," I said, my voice still gentle. "Your other business, not real estate, the one you're a silent partner in." Chloe's face went rigid, the color drained from her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I reached for the tote bag I'd placed by my chair. From it, I pulled my laptop. I opened it and turned the screen so both she and Robert could see. On the display was the bright, cheerful homepage of Verdant Home. "This is Verdant Home," I explained to Robert, as if introducing him to a new species. "It's a very successful online company. They specialize in ethically sourced, sustainable home goods. They are, and I quote from their mission statement, committed to using business as a force for social and environmental good." Robert stared at the screen, his expression one of pure confusion. "What does this have to do with anything?" "Well," I said, clicking to the next tab. It was a screenshot of the company's official Pride Month campaign, a rainbow-colored graphic with the words, "Love is love." They're very progressive. They donate a portion of their profits to LGBTQ plus youth charities. They actively campaign for climate justice. They run features celebrating immigrants and refugees. I clicked through a small gallery of screenshots, a visual tour of every single value Robert had spent a lifetime condemning. With each click, Chloe seemed to shrink further into the sofa cushions. Her face was a mask of sheer panic. "This is the radical, entitled nonsense you complain about, isn't it, Robert?" I asked quietly. "The woke agenda that's ruining the country." "It's filth," he spat, his eyes narrowed at the screen. "I agree, it must look that way to you," I said. Then I delivered the final blow. I clicked to the last tab. It was the official state business filing for Verdant Home, LLC. I had zoomed in on the section listing the company's owners. Maya's name was there. and right below it, impossible to deny, was the name Chloe Miller. "Then I'm afraid I have some bad news for you," I said, my voice losing its gentle tone and taking on a hard, clear edge. "Because your daughter, Chloe, isn't just an investor in this filth. She is a 40% owner. She's a founding partner. She's been profiting from this radical nonsense for the past 4 years." I let the words hang in the air. The silence was absolute. Robert's gaze shifted from the screen to his daughter's ashen face. The confusion in his eyes slowly curdled into a dawning, horrifying understanding. Chloe was frozen, her mouth slightly agape, looking like a cornered animal. "And the best part," I added, unable to stop myself, "is where she got the money. My source, the company's founder, tells me that Chloe's seed capital came from a very generous gift from her father. The money you gave her to build a respectable life, she used it to fund a company that stands for everything you despise." The explosion that followed was not loud, but it was volcanic. Robert slowly rose from his recliner, his entire body trembling with a rage that was terrifying to behold. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, shaking voice that was far more menacing. "Is this true?" he asked Chloe, his voice dripping with venom. Chloe could only nod, tears welling in her eyes. "Daddy, I can explain." "Explain what?" he whispered. "That my daughter is a liar, that you've been taking my money and funneling it to causes I find morally repugnant, that you stood here and let your brother's wife be crucified for having beliefs that you yourself are secretly profiting from." He looked at her, and for the first time, I don't think he saw his perfect princess. He saw a stranger, a hypocrite. The betrayal he felt was monumental, dwarfing anything he had felt towards me. It wasn't just about ideology, it was about money, trust, and the core of his family's identity. The confrontation was over. I had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had shattered Chloe's world. The immediate aftermath was brutally swift. Robert, in his cold, quiet rage, did not banish Chloe with a dramatic shout. It was more chilling than that. He simply looked at her and said, "Get out of my house." Then he turned to James and me. "You too as well, I need to think." We left without a word. Chloe scrambled out behind us, sobbing, but neither of us looked back. The drive home was as silent as the one after the first disastrous dinner, but this time, the silence was not one of tension, but of shock and exhaustion. When we walked into our own home, James wrapped his arms around me and held me for a long time. "I'm so sorry, Ellie," he whispered into my hair. "I'm sorry I didn't see it clearly from the start. I'm sorry I ever let you feel like you were alone in this." In that moment, the final crack in our own personal schism healed. We were a team. The rest of the world could fall away, but we were a team. The fallout from the confrontation rippled through the Miller family like a seismic shockwave. Robert, a man to whom financial integrity and ideological purity were paramount, could not reconcile Chloe's deception. We learned through James's mother, who called in a flurry of hushed, frantic phone calls, that Robert had completely cut Chloe off. He demanded she pay back every cent of the seed money he had given her, with interest. He removed her as a beneficiary from his will and told her he didn't want to see or speak to her until she had divested herself from that filth. The family schism I had been blamed for had not been healed. The fault line had just violently shifted and swallowed Chloe whole. Her life, as she knew it, imploded. Her relationship with the father she had spent her entire life trying to please was destroyed. Her status as the golden child was revoked. To raise the money to pay Robert back, she was forced to do the one thing she never wanted to do: sell her stake in Verdant Home. I got an email from Maya a few weeks later. She told me she was now the 100% owner of her company. Chloe had been forced to sell her 40% stake back to Maya at a valuation that was, Maya noted with a hint of satisfaction, significantly less than its market value. Chloe had been desperate for the cash. Maya was free. Her brand, no longer shackled to a silent, hypocritical partner, was thriving. She thanked me, and I wished her all the best. I felt a grim, hollow sense of justice. There was no joy in watching Chloe's life unravel. I hadn't set out to destroy her, I had set out to defend myself. I had simply refused to be the designated villain in her carefully constructed play. My revenge was not an act of aggression, but an act of revelation. I had simply turned on the lights, and the truth did the rest. In the months that followed, James and I rebuilt our life, but on new foundations. We established firm boundaries with his family. We no longer attended the mandatory Sunday dinners. We saw his mother on our own terms, in neutral locations. We did not see Robert at all. The peace we found was not the fragile, exhausting silence of the past, but a real, solid peace built on mutual respect and the freedom to be ourselves. Our marriage, having been tested by fire, was stronger and more honest than it had ever been. I still write on my blog. My little corner of the internet is no longer a secret. James reads every post now. He doesn't always agree with me, but he always respects me. He sees it not as a threat, but as an essential part of the woman he loves. My words are no longer something to be hidden. They are just a part of me, no different from my love for gardening or my freelance career. The experience taught me that the only peace worth having is one where you don't have to sacrifice any part of yourself to maintain it. Chloe tried to take my voice away, but in the end, she only forced me to find its true strength. And that is a victory no one can ever take away.